Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to It's Rainmaking Time. It is a great pleasure to invite Dr. Antal Fekete to the show today, one of the great thinkers and renowned mathematicians, monetary experts having to do with the economy, money, gold, metals, everything you want to know about economics that provides a unique synthesis to what needs to happen to alter our economy so that we're flourishing again. A little bit about him. He's been a professor at large at the International Mountain Institute for Science and Applied Mathematics in Missoula, Montana. He's the author of many monograms and papers. Recently, Real Linear Algebra, monographs on quotient set theory, a new one called Stepnumbers. He's the author of The Art of Precious Metals Trading. He is a renowned international speaker and teacher on gold and the international monetary system. He's a teacher at the Gold Standard Institute out of Australia. He's also taught at the San Francisco School of Economics in 2009, which was very well attended on money and banking. And he has 5 key points and universes of dialogue: fiscal and monetary reform, Real Bills Doctrine, discount versus interest, gold versus interest, and basis. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to welcome Antal Fekete to It's Rainmaking Time. Welcome.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to have this interview with you.
It's an honor for me. I'm so excited, and yet I feel like I have such an educational gap, and that really many of us have an educational gap because most of us have never been taught in school the Real Bills Doctrine, what its contribution has been, why it is it should be enacted again. And I was wondering if you could begin this with what is it and why have you stayed so focused on it being known around the world?
Well, the Real Bills Doctrine is an adjunct to the doctrine of the gold standard. What I mean is that the gold standard, as a lot of people advocate it, is what they call the 100% gold standard. But this is very misleading. You may get the impression that if a gold standard is not 100%, then it's deficient, it's no good. Well, you see, I just point out that this designation 100% is really very misleading. The idea of the Real Bills Doctrine is that the circulation of money is seasonal. For example, at Christmas time, there is far more money in circulation or needed in circulation than, for instance, in January, just after Christmas. And if you want to provide gold coins to get you through the Christmas season, then you will find that at Christmas time there will be a scarcity of gold, and in January there will be an overabundance, and this will create problems. The shopping season at Christmas time will not be satisfactory, and in January the overabundance of gold may create other problems. So to avoid that, Adam Smith, the great economist from Britain, and he lived at the time when the U.S. Constitution was promulgated and signed and adopted. He wrote his famous book called The Wealth of Nations. And in this book, he worked out what today we call the Real Bills Doctrine. And what this means is that consumer demand and production for consumer demand has to be financed with short maturity real bills. In other words, for example, the wholesaler delivers the merchandise to the retail merchant, who will accept it and sign the bill.
Is that like an IOU?
Receive the merchandise, which is, however, payable not on delivery, but 91 days later. 91 is not a number pulled out of a hat, but it is exactly the length of the seasons of the year. So the merchandise is seasonal, it changes seasonally, and therefore the expectation is that it will be sold to the ultimate consumer within 91 days, which is the length of the season. If it cannot be sold during that period, then it probably won't be sold for a whole year until the same season of the year comes around again. But by that time, the taste of the consumer may have changed, and fashion may have changed, and a lot of other factors. So in other words, the merchandise is probably stale, and it can only be sold at a loss. So we are talking about merchandise and consumer goods in the highest demand, what people really will buy. And the volume of this merchandise has to be limited and matched by the demand which is expected. So this Real Bill Doctrine then demands that the merchandise should be moving at pace to the consumer. It cannot be, the real bill cannot be used to finance merchandise which is in store and waiting for the demand to pick up. It has to be on the go. It has this dynamics, and the dynamics creates the credit which moves the merchandise. But it has to be settled in gold at maturity. If it's not, then the person who signed the bill is going to suffer for it, because his bills in the future will not be accepted by the market. It will not circulate. One big point which I'm making when I talk about the Real Bills Doctrine is that banks and bank credit is not absolutely necessary for the smooth operation of the economy. And that's because the real bills will finance whatever the banks can finance. And the bills actually do get into circulation when the wholesale merchant receives the bill signed and delivered from the retail merchant.